In this video, we're going to take a look at 10 mixing tips from Grammy-winning engineers who have worked with some of the biggest acts in the industry.
Artists like Metallica, Taylor Swift, Rolling Stones, Dua Lipa, Prince, Kanye West, and many more.
We've got a lot to cover today. Let's jump right in with number 10. And number 10 is Jason Joshua. Credits with Seal, Janet Jackson, Maroon 5, Backstreet Boys, Katy Perry, Snoop Dogg. And pretty straightforward tip. Send a kick to an aux and then parallel compress with a DBX 160 compressor and then EQ boost the lows and cut the upper mids on the aux to give the kick a little bit more of that nice warmth and body. Let's see if it works.
Yeah, let's give this kick a little bit more oomph. So first, let's take a listen to the track. I'm going to isolate just this verse section. Here we go. I'm going to mute the kick aux for now. So this is just without that trick kind of implemented.
Maybe we should laugh, maybe we should cry, maybe tame our tongues, make room for why.
Let's move into the chorus section. I think we can probably get a nicer little chunk of the song here.
Run it down.
And I'm going to mute the vocals. Okay, so we've got our kick aux here. Let's go ahead and turn that on. Okay, let me show you what's going on here. We've got the DBX 160 smashing this thing, right? So if we just solo the aux track, you can hear how much we're actually compressing this. Can you hear that all right?
Clicky, clicky.
Yeah, totally. It's just a click, right?
You wouldn't think there's anything left.
Right? So the original kick drum sounds like this. And then the parallel compressed track is this. Right? It's just like tap, 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 right?
Tap, taparoo right there.
Tap, tap, taparoo. And then we've got a boost in the low end, and the trick is to reduce the upper mids, but I just went totally extreme with this thing. I just shelved the lows and I shelved off the highs, right? So after we apply that EQ to the aux, it sounds like this. So it's just like that body. It's just this area of the kick coming through, and then you just blend that into taste. So we'll just blend this into taste just in solo so you can hear what's going on. And really, I think the most effective way to use a trick like this is to just do it in context, right? You can't do this kind of stuff in solo. Otherwise, you're just making this decision in isolation, right? In a vacuum without all the other pieces of the puzzle in play, right? So let's go ahead. Let's do it in context. I'm just going to bring in the kick aux here. Without. I really like it.
It does a thing. It's given it some more weight, some more body, and kicks don't always need that. But if it did need that, that's a great way to do it. I wasn't expecting to get that much with the DBX 160 sounding the way it did, just with the clickiness, but the EQ did it. It put it in there, mixed it into taste. I dig it.
Yeah, totally. And we can take this a step further too, right? Like if we wanted more click out of that kick drum, maybe we release this filter a little bit more, right? You can kind of sculpt the parallel compressed sound in whichever way makes the most sense for the track, right?
Yeah, that DBX 160 is so great on anything with low end. Kicks, bass guitar, I love it. It just has a weight to it that very few compressors have. I really love it.
Real quick before we dive into the next tip, we just updated our popular EQ cheat sheets and frequency chart, and your understanding of EQ and the frequency spectrum is one of the largest factors, if not the largest factor, in reaching industry standard quality with your music. And although there are a lot of different frequency charts you can find online, this one is unique because it highlights each area of the frequency spectrum and identifies how they sound when you cut and when you boost. And we've gone through a few different versions of this to make it super simple and easy to understand. And then the frequency cheat sheet that goes with it gives you some practical advice on when you might want to cut or boost these different frequency ranges for certain instruments and situations. So if you want to grab those PDFs for free, just go to the link in the description or head to mastering.com/charts to get instant access. So go ahead, pause the video now if you want to go and do that, and then we'll move on.
Number 9, Tony Maserati. Credits with David Bowie, James Brown, Keith Urban, Weezer, Beyonce, Ed Sheeran, Sharon,
You boomer.
Ed Sheeran. Turn your music down. The tip is broad tone shaping the vocal with a multi-band compressor. So instead of your static EQs or your static compression, using multi-band compression. Let's see what that looks like.
Yeah, totally. Let's see here. I've got it set up on this verse vocal. Let's check it out. So this is the EQ that we've applied to this verse vocal. Here it is.
Maybe we should laugh, maybe we should cry, maybe tame our tongues, make room for why.
So just broad scoops here, just like pulling out this buildup that was happening in the 400 to 500 range and then pulling out the 1K range. And again, just this kind of like broad scoop going on. And I went ahead and mimicked that with the multi-band. So I've got these two bands. We've got this first one kind of focusing on the 200 to 500 range, kind of broadly kind of scooping that out. And then one focusing around the 1K range. Right. So let's go ahead and just kind of flip back and forth between these two processors and see what we can hear. I'm going to start with the EQ and then we'll bop over to the multiband.
Maybe we should laugh, maybe we should cry, maybe tame our tongues, make room for why. All of this will come and all of this will go. Maybe we weren't meant to ever know. Just enjoy.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing here is like a little bit of that low end is actually, or I shouldn't say low end, but this mid range is actually coming through for a moment and then being attenuated. Whereas with the static EQ, it's not letting through any mid-range frequencies at all, right? And I don't think that one is necessarily better than the other. I think it's just kind of like depends on what you want to achieve with the vocal. Do you want a little bit of that mid-range to come through for a moment and then disappear, or do you want it just statically cut throughout the track? I think both are cool, but to each their own.
If you know me, you know I love static EQs. I'm always going to rock the static EQ. I love the intention of making a choice. However, there are moments that the multi-band compressor can be nice, especially a vocal that has a lot of range. It's changing a lot from low to high. Sometimes when the higher falsetto is in there, you want the lower range, and then you want to take it out when it's in the lower register. And if it's jumping around a lot, not necessarily from like a verse to a chorus, but within a certain part, it can be really nice to give you the best of both worlds. Give you the low end back when it's on a falsetto part, take it away when it's on the lower register. But I do like the intentionality of making choices with static EQ. You got to be careful with those multi-band compressors. Don't just throw them on there. They are making choices for you, so just be careful with that one.
Dude, you know what? I would probably lean more towards a multi-band EQ, multi-band compressor for would be not necessarily a track like this, but maybe with a more exposed, intimate kind of vocal where you want a little bit more of that kind of natural kind of tonality, like little hints of that mid-range or low end to kind of poke through. Maybe you've got kind of like a sparse arrangement or something like that, to get really, really nuanced with the sculpting. I think that's probably a scenario where I would move more towards multiband compression. But in a dense mix like this, where the vocals competing with a bunch of guitars and a lot of instrumentation, I'd probably opt for a static move. Totally.
Always try it. As they say, sounds good is good. If it's working, it's working. I also like on a big gang vocal or group of backups to throw a multi-band on there to clean out mid-range, give it depth when it needs depth, give it, take it away when it's starting to get muddy and stuff like that. I like that move a lot. So it's in a similar vein.
Yep.
But just be careful with those multi-bands. All right, on to number 8, Jakir King. Credits with Tom Waits, Kings of Leon, Norah Jones, Shania Twain, even Shawn Mendes. The tip here is using delay to widen and create movement on a panned instrument. So an example of this would be doing a short delay on one side, a long delay on the other side, to just give it a variance from side to side. It could be really cool. Let's play with it.
So here's that guitar. It's panned over to the left, about 50% over to the left side. Let's take a listen. Now let's take a listen in context. Just flat guitar, just hanging out over to one side. So Jakir's tip here is to add this delay track that kind of splits each side. There's one timing on one side, another timing on the other side. So if you're going to do this trick with a mono instrument, it's important that you set this up to be pre-fader, right? So we're sending the signal pre-fader. Otherwise, the aux track is going to take the panned signal into consideration, and we don't want that. We just want to send the aux track just a straight signal. So make sure if you're going to use this trick, you use pre-fader mode on the send, right? So then on the actual aux track, we've got this delay set up. And on the left side, I've got a 16th note. On the right side, I've got a quarter note. Here's what it sounds like in solo, first without the delay and then with. Hear that?
I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, just bouncing it around and create some really cool motion, and pulls the listener around, kind of makes it more interesting, and it's still very rhythmic. See, I've got these kind of synced to the tempo of the song as well. So I've got 16th note over here, quarter note over there. So it's still kind of in line with everything that's going on, creating some nice bubbly, bouncy kind of movement there. Pretty playful of a part, right?
Yeah, pretty straightforward. I don't think people always understand how the ear likes variance. It likes dissonance. It likes things that aren't so perfect. Our ear gets really tired with stuff that's very static. So if you have the same delay going the whole time, the ear kind of subtly picks up on that. It gets a little bit disinterested, even if it can't tell what it's listening to. There's it just gets, let's see, what's the word I'm trying to say?
It gets bored.
It just gets bored. The ear gets bored.
Just gets bored.
It gets too familiar.
Doesn't want to listen to robots.
Yeah, it's like your buddy that comes over and he's just like there too much. He's there. He just lingers. Anyway, it gives it some variance. The delay stops becoming a lingerer, and it creates some variance from side to side. That's important stuff. It's the same reason why we like saturation and imperfections and harmonics and different things like that. So don't be afraid to make things uneven left to right.
Yeah. Yeah, this is cool. I want to listen one more time and just kind of hear that delay kind of bouncing around. Reminds me of The Edge. We could play around with the timings on this too. Really kind of like that half note that's going on here. But, just play around with stuff, explore it.
Yep. Simple thing, but it does a lot. It really does. It's nice. All right, moving on. Number 7, Manny American. Credits with Elton John, John Mayer, Santana, John Legend, Kanye West, Imagine Dragons. Pretty simple tip here. More of a product review or something you should know about. A product is a plugin you should know about because everyone's using it. It's simply using R bass to enhance the sub frequencies on a bass. R bass will enhance a lot of different frequencies, and this tip, it's particular to the sub frequencies, and you would most notably know this from Rihanna's Umbrella. So let's dive into this, see what we can do with those sub frequencies using R bass.
Yeah. Let's check it out. So here I've got R bass, and I'm just putting this directly on the bass bus. I'm going to go ahead and start low and then just kind of blend it in. So here we go. Now that's a super exaggerated version of that effect, right? So we're just going to dial it in. Hear the difference?
Yes, sir. It's doing a thing to the low end.
Yeah, it's just kind of making it like bigger. It's introduced, I believe this plugin introduces like a bunch of harmonics, right? To just kind of like fill out the lows, and you can kind of focus it in on any frequency you want. So if you did want to go for like the subs and like this really low kind of area, you can pull this frequency slider back over here and kind of get that really thumping. In this particular mix, I have it kind of focused around 80 because the kick is sitting lower in the frequency spectrum. It's sitting around 50-ish. So, not really feeling like I need a whole bunch of sub information below that for this bass. So instead, I'm focusing it up a little bit higher in the frequency spectrum and just kind of giving each one of those elements their own space, right? Room.
Yeah. Absolutely. And just always be careful with those sub frequencies too. There's a lot of information down there. It carries a lot of sonic weight, and you'll learn if you ever got into mastering how much weight that carries and how much it affects your mastering compressors and different things like that. Your compressors are going to pick up on those frequencies a lot more. So if you have a ton of those frequencies, you have to know that the ear doesn't hear a ton of that, and it carries a lot of weight. So sometimes you just need to be really careful and balance that out, not having too much in there, maybe cut them back a little bit so that you can make the whole track louder in mastering.
Yep, totally.
Just be careful with that one. All right, number 6, Bob Horn. Credits with Kelly Clarkson, let's see, Usher, Barry Manilow, BTS. And this is all about serial de-essing. So we're going to use 2 de-essers here, one at the 5 to 8K range and one at the 10 to 12K range, and dial them in a little different, put them in serial, see how that does compared to just using one.
Yeah, totally. So I got that hooked up here on the verse vocal because there was a bunch of SH sounds that were super harsh. And I'll turn off de-essing to start, and we can kind of listen to that.
Maybe we should laugh, maybe we should cry, maybe tame our tongues, make room for why.
Perfect vocal to demonstrate this on, right? Lots of T sounds, lots of sh, SH sounds, right? So here's the idea. We've got one de-esser here, kind of targeting around 8K, and I did filter solo this on to kind of like listen to where those S sounds were most prominent, right? And then I've got a second de-esser on, taking care of the upper range, like between 10 and 12. And it turned out that the harshest of the S sounds and T sounds were kind of living in this 10 to 12 range, this 11K, basically, like right around this spot, right? So first de-esser, we're going to turn this one on, and then we'll turn the second one on. Here it is without de-essing.
Maybe we should laugh, maybe we should cry.
Listen to those SHs. Now with the first de-esser.
Maybe we should laugh, maybe we should cry, maybe tame our tongues.
And second de-esser.
Maybe we should laugh, maybe we should cry, maybe tame our tongues, make room for why.
Without the second.
Maybe we should laugh, maybe we should cry.
With the second.
Maybe we should laugh, maybe we should cry, maybe tame our tongues, make room for why.
I think where I noticed it the most is on those T's.
T's, yep.
Right? I think this one, the second de-esser, is grabbing the T's, that really high t frequency, right?
Cry, maybe tame our tongues. Cry, maybe tame our tongues.
Hear it? That's without, now with.
Cry, maybe tame our tongues.
And you know, you'd have to blend this to taste, maybe back off a little bit, but the idea is, I mean, the bottom line is this concept works, right? One de-esser for some things, maybe SH sounds, another de-esser for the T's, the harsher kind of upper frequency kind of stuff, right? If you can split them up like that.
Be interesting to see down in the comments, you have a conversation about why would you do this in serial as opposed to using something like FabFilter's de-esser where you could put the range from like 8500 to 10.8 or something like that and just have it cover that whole spectrum. Like, why would you use this as opposed to that? If anyone has good insight on that, or if Jake, you do.
Yeah, totally. I know why I might consider doing something like that. For me, it's like some de-essers will actually activate based on a shelf, right? Just like one single shelf. And you'll say, hey, I want to start that shelf at 6K, or I want to start that shelf at 5K. And then it'll quickly activate during those moments, right? But what that does is it could potentially dig into the tone of the vocal, right? In theory, like one argument is it goes so fast that who cares, right? But I don't know. I would love to see a discussion around this in the comments as well. Just see what you guys think.
Yeah, very cool. All right, on to number 5, Mr. Tom Lord Alge. Credits with the Rolling Stones, Peter Gabriel, Blink-182, Sum 41, Dave Matthews Band, many others. And the tip here is layering multiple bass tones strategically throughout the arrangement. So this should be interesting. Very cool. Let's dive into this.
Yeah, I use this all the time. I love it. Tom Lord Alge, he's one of my favorite mixers. You know, works on a lot of bands I'm really into. So here's the idea is we've got this bass here, and then as soon as the chorus hits, we've got a second bass track. So all I've done is literally chopped this section out, this region out, and dragged it down to a new track with some different processing on it. And this particular processing is pushing that bass through just an amp, a guitar amp. It sounds like this. Just dirty, right? Down and dirty tone. I'm also cutting out a lot of the low end here so that it doesn't just pile on and create a bunch of buildup. So really I'm using the mid range and some of the upper mids here for additional oomph just in this chorus section. And listen to the kind of power it has. Just kind of helps to improve the impact when that chorus actually comes in. Check it out. First, without, we're going to roll into the chorus, and then with. Okay, now I'm going to introduce this bass grit track. Take a listen. Cool, check it out. Here, and I've got some dynamics processing on there. Let's take a listen. I'm just going to exaggerate this effect. Check it out. Cool. Gives a little extra body, a little extra weight, a little extra punch, just like right up the gut, right up the center of the mix. And you blend that to taste. You know, the blend on that's going to be different depending on what kind of processing you're using. I'm using this amp from THU, which is part of the Slate Digital pack here. But, you know, you can put whatever you want on it. You can drive it through amps. You can drive it through different saturators, distortion plugins, pedals, things like that, you know, just to layer it in and give that chorus a little bit more impact.
Yeah, I think it does a few different things. I think on a production level, you're using it to elevate, change tones, give variance. There's a lot of reasons why you could do that in a production session, or as a mix engineer, you can use it to elevate for those reasons. But also you have to think of different parts as having different sonic characters. And if you mix it all static the whole time, it may not work as well as being very intentional about what is the sonic balance between each individual part. You don't want it to be noticeable, like where there's a noticeable sonic change, but there are little things you can do to just bring out the best of every section of the song by thinking of the tone and character of the different things that you're using.
Yeah, and it's a feel thing, right? It's about the feel. For me, anyway, I'm paying attention to how this section feels. Does it feel bigger? Does it feel like it has more impact? Right? Felt more than heard.
100%.
In many cases, not always, but in many cases for sure.
Absolutely. Great tip. All right, on to number 4, Josh Goodwin. Credits with Cher, Dua Lipa, Justin Bieber, Maneskin, 30 Seconds to Mars, Jennifer Lopez, Celine Dion. And the tip is splitting the lead vocal regions into separate tracks based on the different EQ needs. So this is somewhat similar to the last tip in a way. You're just thinking of this of the separate parts of the song and the needs in the separate parts of the song. So let's see what that does in a context of a vocal.
Yeah, totally. And I've got this set up actually on a different session. So let's just play a little bit of this here. And you can see where I've got all of these vocal parts kind of broken up. I've got a verse low and a verse high track here. And originally this was just one track. You know, I've got some other examples down here we'll talk about in a minute. So let's take a little bit of a listen here. I'm going to go, I don't know, right around there. This part.
Windows block the daylight that drove away the night. You've seen this all before. Every day you've dragged your feet across the spoon, and every night they stumble back once more.
So these two vocals have slightly different EQ curves. This one, this verse low, has got this, and then verse high looks a little bit different, right? What have we added here? There was a little bit of build-up as soon as he started singing up in the slightly different register, right? In the higher register. So the build-up areas were just in different spots. You know, 500 to 800 here needed a little bit of an additional scoop. So what you could do is automate that on and off on the same verse track if you wanted to, but I just prefer a little bit more of kind of like a visual take on this kind of stuff. You know, I like to see it in a different track, and especially if you're doing this a lot, like splitting the vocal up a lot from like maybe phrase to phrase or word to word or note to note or something like that, it's easier to just slice out the region and drag it down rather than programming all of these automation curves to happen. You know, just my opinion and my personal workflow. That's why I really like this trick, right? And we can see here at the pre-chorus, I've got that going on the sustained notes here. So check this out. We've got this processing going on in those sustained notes. This is actually a track by one of our students who we've been using this track as a teaching demonstration in some of our free events, our Fix the Mix events. And we just recently, we did this in a live session, and you can see that we're combing this all out and adding some soothe up here, which is a dynamic resonance suppressor. Just taming these really high frequencies just on those sustained notes, just on those long notes. Here's what it sounds like, what those long notes sound like without that kind of processing. Check it out. Hear that?
Ouch.
Yeah.
Not good. Like going to the dentist.
Totally. So just those really long notes needed it. These phrases are pretty okay.
It's the feeling every day's been.
They're happening in moments, right? But nothing that's like really just like drilling into your back teeth or anything like that. But these are the ones, these sustained notes, those are the ones that need to be dragged down and just processed slightly differently so that it sounded a little bit smoother to the ear. And this is what, this is Josh Goodwin's method for taking care of or fixing vocals like that. And you can see I've done that, in the chorus too. We've got these long sustained notes, same thing, just doing different processing on those to fix a very particular problem. Right.
You're going through and you're being very intentional about every part. Vocals are so important, and it's worth the time to go in and just make sure every section is as good as you can make it without it sounding unnatural. And I watched Jake do this live on our last Fix the Mix session. If you want to go watch that, you can go to the courses.mastering.com and watch the replay. But that vocal was a good vocal, but it was actually really tricky. It had moments that were really resonant and moments that were changing tones a lot. And so to break it down and to treat each part the way he did, we watched slowly as this vocal started to elevate to something that started to sound really expensive, as we say. So it was really great stuff. All right, number 3, Mr. Andrew Sheps. Credits with Bon Jovi, Beyonce, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Metallica, Linkin Park, Lana Del Rey, many others. And the tip here is for vocals as well. And what he does is he uses an EQ to cut the bottom and boost the top. He uses maybe like a Pultec or something like that, and then just compresses the heck out of it with an LA2A. And then uses a second EQ to boost the low end and reintroduce the fullness, and then cut the top end to reduce harshness with the Pultec again, potentially. And why it works is it allows a compressor to react to the high end of the vocal, peg it into place, and then reintroduce the lows as needed. So let's watch this. Pretty cool technique from Andrew Sheps. Let's break it down.
Yeah, totally. And he actually uses, I think this has been confirmed, I think he uses Pultec, LA2A, Pultec. That's kind of like, that's the actual chain from him. But you could use, whatever you wanted. Take this concept and experiment with different gear, experiment with different types of processing and things like that. But here it is. This is what it looks like. I like to call this the sandwich. We've got the Pultec here, and we are cutting 100 and below. We've got a shelf here at 100, starting at 100, and then we're attenuating that. We're cutting it, right? So we're cutting out, we're soaking up all that low end, and then we are boosting the high end at 5K. Okay, the upper mids. So check it out.
Light of the world, let's burn it down.
Super gross, right? So what that does is we're taking out the low end so that the compressor really works really hard on that upper mid-range, just kind of like pegging that in place.
Light of the world, let's burn it down.
So it's reacting to all of that upper frequency content. It's not being triggered by any of the low end content. So it's not being influenced by any of those super powerful, strong low end frequencies or anything like that. So then once you get that signal nice and tight, we can add this second EQ and then just sculpt it. a little bit more. We can reintroduce the low end. We don't have to worry about the high end dipping in and out of the arrangement. We can just keep it nice and flat. So here on the Pultec, I'm reintroducing 100 hertz, right? I'm boosting it back in, giving it more body. And I am attenuating 5K, right? So I'm cutting out all those harsh frequencies and just kind of rolling it all the way back.
Tired of the world, let's burn it down.
I'm going to turn it off and then back on.
Anything we can destroy worth having around.
So warming that vocal back up, but that upper mid-range and that high end is just cutting through nice and consistently. Let's listen in context the rest of the mix. Here we go.
Tired of the world, let's burn it down.
Turn it off.
Anything we can destroy worth having around.
Turn it back on.
Tired of the world, let's burn it down.
Off again.
Anything we can destroy worth having around.
So what I really like about this trick and this technique is that it helps that vocal cut through really dense mixes. This is especially helpful with, rock music, where we have these really upper mid-range heavy elements and high-end elements like these smashing drums and these distorted guitars and things like that, all living in that range. So getting the vocal to sit nice and consistently within all of that stuff is key. And I think this is a great way to do it. I've been using this in my mixes recently, and I really like the flexibility and the result that I've been getting out of this thing.
I know all of you are watching this are at different levels. If you can't hear that, replay this video, rewind it and replay it when he's going back and forth until you hear the difference. It's really important. You hear a lot of amateur mixing and the vocal is just washing in and out of the mix. It's getting lost with everything that's going on. And this is really helping it just stay really consistent all the way through and cut right through. And that's how you got to have the vocals sounding if you want to engage the listener the right way. Vocals, again, are so important. You don't want them to get lost in the music at all.
Yeah, totally. And I do want to just kind of demonstrate how to dial this in just very quickly on the back end with the high end, because this is the part that's really kind of crucial, is getting that high end right. So after you've compressed this thing, you're going to get a sound that's like this. Super thin, right? It's all upper mid-range focused. And then you reintroduce the low end. So we've got some more body in there, but then we've still got that harshness happening in the upper mids. So we attenuate until that harshness kind of goes away. I'll go ahead and demonstrate that. If you attenuate too much, you'll notice that the vocals sink back in the mix. So there's a sweet spot to be had. It's kind of like this delicate dance of finding, okay, where is it? Where am I attenuating the harshness just enough so that it doesn't annoy my ears or drill into the back of my teeth, and sits and cuts really nicely through those guitars or the other instrumentation in the mix. I think that's probably pretty good right there. But the point is, you have to play with it. You have to find that sweet spot. If you're not sure, check against your reference tracks to make sure you're in the ballpark, and away we go.
Yeah, one little side note, I've seen a lot of amateur mixes do another thing that it just really makes that vocal sound what we call sometimes karaoke-ish, and it's too much low end. So as you're bringing that low end, have the right amount, but too much, it makes it sound almost like proximity effect on a handheld microphone. That's why we call it a karaoke effect. It's like someone singing in a karaoke bar. And there's nothing that takes a polished production and makes it sound live and amateurish like too much low end. So just ease it into taste, ease the highs down to taste, or those upper mids down to taste, and it will sit perfectly in the mix and sound nice and expensive.
Yeah, I love this one. It's a great tip.
Yeah, that's a really great tip and worthy of its number 3 ranking. Now on to number 2. Ken Lewis, credits with Taylor Swift, Lady Gaga, Bruno Mars, Alicia Keys, John Legend, Lana Del Rey. And the tip is mid-side processing on the mix bus, stereo boost on 10K and above, and then accentuate the mid presence of the vocals in just the middle, like 2 to 5K.
Yep, totally. So I've got that set up here on the stereo out. So I've got this EQ set up for only processing the sides. And I've got this boosted. It's a shelf starting at 10K. I've also got another EQ here, boosting the upper mids here and just in the middle of the mix, right? So the sides, we're just boosting that high-end content, and the center of the mix, we're just boosting the 2K to 5K range to bring those vocals forward, draw a little bit more attention to the vocals, right? So let's kind of break these down and just do these one by one. The first, we'll do this kind of the sides, bringing up the sides in terms of the high end. Let's check it out. First without and then with. Nice little lift in the sides, you know, it's very subtle. I mean, we can exaggerate this a little bit more, I think. Check it out. I kind of like the sparkle that gives to the guitars. Not as crazy about what it's doing to like the cymbals and things like that. But okay. And then our channel EQ, this one is just the mids, right? So bringing the vocal forward. First, we're going to start with it off, and then we're going to bring it in. You know what? Maybe I'll start at the beginning of the chorus here. Now with. That's actually very effective. I'm going to do that one more time. Hear that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's another one I'm going to caution to be careful with. I'm not a huge fan of anything on the mix bus. These are moves as a mastering engineer that I would do, and I would do them with potentially better tools than someone in a mix session might do them with. That being said, Ken's a master, so I'm not going to, say that he did it wrong here by any means, but these are moves that a mastering engineer would do. And again, all I would really say is just be careful with these. You're dealing with frequencies that can add a ton of harshness. It can do too much. And use your ear, of course, with all these things. There's no one tip that'll get you where you need to go. But if you bring a little bit of that in, it is doing a nice thing. If you know what you're doing and you can impart some of that flavor, then I say go for it.
Yeah, my 2 cents on that is that these moves are doing something very specific for me in this mix. The first one, bringing up the sides, I really like what that's doing to the guitars, but I don't like what it's doing to the cymbals, right? So for me, why not just go to the guitars in the mix, maybe the guitar bus, and just shelf it up a little bit to bring that shimmer rather than do side processing on the stereo out or the mix bus, right? Or with the vocals, right? If we're just processing the mids of the mix, I mean, that mostly has an impact on the vocals. So why wouldn't I just go over to the vocals, either the vocal bus or the lead vocal, and just boost that area a little bit there instead, right? Again, like we're accomplishing the same thing with both moves. And I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong, but that would be my workflow for something like that. It's to get a little bit more granular with it rather than making mix bus or mastering kind of moves on the mix. But this is Ken Lewis we're talking about here.
Yep.
So
Ken can do whatever he wants.
you do there ain't no wrong way.
No, there's no wrong. But again, I love the mindset of a mix engineer who's going in and working to solve problems and enhance things on the more local level that they can. They have access to the guitar track, for instance, that they can tweak. And so just putting a Band-Aid on it on the stereo bus, that's not going to work. That's not what Ken's doing. It's more of an enhancement piece. But just be careful and realize that you can do a lot of these things on a more local level on maybe the mix bus of the guitars or the drums or something like that. And it's a lot more effective. And then the mastering engineer can do the rest.
Yeah. Cool.
And that leads us to the last one. Number 1, Mr. Chris Lord-Alge. The best. Credits with Prince, Stevie Nicks, Peter Frampton, Muse, Madonna, Nickelback, all the rest. CLA, we know him and love him. The tip here is blending wet effects for vocals. A plate reverb with a long pre-delay, and a delay with slightly different timing on each channel left to right. Let's break this down. This one's a lot of fun.
Yeah, totally. So we've got that set up here. Here's the verse vocal. Here it is dry.
Maybe we should laugh, maybe we should cry.
And then here it is with reverb.
Maybe we should laugh, maybe we should cry.
Here it is with reverb and delay.
Maybe we should laugh, maybe we should cry. Maybe tame our tongues, make room for...
So let's break it down. We got bus 21 here. Here's our reverb on that bus. So what we've got is we've got a plate happening here. It's kind of a longer decay, second and a half, maybe more like a moderate decay or medium decay time, I would say, right? But here's what I've seen Chris do for a lot of his reverbs. I know he uses the 480, but I've seen, him use pre-delay times all the way up to 150 or something like that, like really long pre-delay times. And the reason he gives is he likes to separate that reverb from the vocal quite a bit so that the vocal sounds like it's nice and upfront in the mix. And then the reverb is more like set back in the mix, right? So there's some dimension that's going on here. So take a listen. I'll go ahead and just kind of mess with the pre-delay knob so you can hear what's going on.
Maybe we should laugh, maybe we should cry. Maybe tame our tongues, make room for why.
So that's with no pre-delay. And notice how that vocal is just kind of like sunken back and feels kind of distant. And then we'll increase the pre-delay. You'll notice that it starts to move forward. Delay starts to move back.
Maybe we should laugh, maybe we should cry. Maybe tame our tongues, make room for why. All of this will come and all of this will go.
Nice separation there, right? So that's number 1. Number 2 is this delay trick, right? So this is kind of staggering the delay times. And a good way to kind of start this out is to sync it to the tempo of the track. And then we've got, we're starting with a quarter note here and then desync and just oogie one side a little bit earlier or later than the other side. So you're staggering the times. And what this effect actually does is it gives the delay width and uses the stereo field instead of having that delay come right through the gut, like right up the center, and then just kind of fighting with the vocal and kind of cluttering things up. Right? It's a nice way to just create width around the vocal. Right? It's really cool. So first, without, we'll just do straight quarter notes. So what this sounds like, and I'll turn off the reverb so you can hear.
Maybe we should laugh, maybe we should cry, maybe tame our tongues.
So hear how that's all just kind of like coming directly from the center of the mix here. Now, let's stagger these a little bit. Just like 20 milliseconds or so. All right. Somewhere in there. If I can get it. Very touchy.
Maybe we should laugh, maybe we should cry, maybe tame our tongues, make room for why.
Right? Hear how that's spread all the way across the stereo field now, no longer coming from the center, but it's making use of the space. Some plugins actually have a setting that will do this for you, like this one, Repeater. There's a spread option that'll actually automatically stagger the sides so that it's in like a stereo mode. But if you don't have an option like that, you can do it manually. Just grab a stereo delay, slightly different timings between the sides, and that'll widen things right up.
Again, we're dealing with creating some intrigue side to side, some variance, spreading that vocal out, and then a beautiful reverb with pre-delay. Answer this in the comments below. If you have an opinion on pre-delay versus compressing your reverbs, it's doing a similar thing. Why would you use one over the other?
Pre-delay in terms of compressing your reverbs in terms of like sidechain compressing?
Mm-hmm.
Your reverb to the vocal?
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah.
Why would you use one over the other? I'd love to hear people comment on that.
Discuss.
Tickle those keys in chat. Yep, another great one from CLA, a timeless trick, a timeless tip. Hey, none of these tips and tricks will mean a whole lot unless you have a good foundation, so make sure you always understand the core concepts beneath all this stuff. These are all just for fun. They're little weapons you can add to your tool belt, and but make sure you have the foundation and know why you're doing what you're doing. That's always going to get you a lot farther. Comment below and let us know which ones of these you liked. What were your favorite tips? Are there any others we should talk about next time? And if you want to learn more about this stuff and how to make music that sounds professional, click the link in the description below. Download a bunch of our free resources. That's all for now, y'all. Until the next one, have a great one. Keep making music. We'll see you on the next one.